This video has been sponsored by Mesos CNC Controllers. Well, as many of you probably already know, there's a new Terminator movie on the horizon. After watching the trailer, I was reminded of an idea I had a year or so ago for a Terminator-inspired Hot Wheels vehicle. This is not a car set in that world, but instead a car in the vein of the pop culture and themed cars Mattel makes. This idea was to etch the T-800's face onto the metal of a car. I could then polish the metal to get that shiny exoskeleton look. Of course, there are some tricks to get this to work, and I figured I would take you along for the ride. I chose this 56 Ford truck as it had a smooth roof to work with. Originally, I wanted to use a combat medic van that I could turn into a Cyberdyne Systems company fleet vehicle with the face on top, sort of a foreshadowing type of look. But unfortunately, the combat medic doesn't have a smooth top, and for this to work and look right, I really need a smooth top. So I ended up settling for this truck, even though it has no real tie-in to the movies. No doubt I'll come across the perfect vehicle in the future, but really I just wanted to try this out, and at this time I wasn't 100% sure it would even work. Thus, this truck fit the bill. The first thing I'll need to do is take the car apart. Normally I would then remove the paint, but in this case I'm relying on the paint. So instead I'll place the truck in my laser engraver and then cut the T-800 face into the paint. Now I have a whole video on paint cutting with the laser if you want the full scoop on how this is done. Anytime I break out the laser, I get comments about people not having such a thing at home. I get that, but this really is not possible to do without a laser engraver, unless of course you can metal engrave on your own, in which case you would probably just engrave the item in the metal and not really worry about etching to begin with. The other answer I have to that comment is that you can buy laser engravers for less than $100 on Amazon and eBay if you really want to do something like this. They tend to have small work areas, but they could still do what I'm doing here. Now unfortunately the laser was set a bit too high and ended up cutting away a little too much of the paint. To mitigate this issue, I came back with some enamel paint to protect some of the areas that were burnt off. This is especially needed around the eyes. Once the paint dried, I placed the truck into some iron chloride solution, which attacks the Zamac metal with the same veracity as molten iron to a time-traveling robot, though with far less flailing around. I also have a video on making iron chloride at home, as it's very useful for aging metals like aluminum and zinc, so I'll put a link below if you're interested. Once the iron chloride has done its job, it's time to remove all the paint with some aircraft paint remover. Once the paint is removed, you can see here that it looks terrible. Yeah, it took a few revisions until I got all the settings right on the laser, along with the time the item needed to be in the iron chloride solution. I could give you all these settings, but they would only work if you're doing this face on this truck using the same laser along with the iron chloride bath of the same concentration. In other words, you just have to play with it. Next I'll do some light polishing of the metal, focusing mostly on the face, but polishing the entire truck. This is actually leading down a path to nowhere because I end up changing things later, but at this time my plan was to have a polished truck. Next I'll move to copper plating and then chrome plating the metal. The copper plating is a strike plate for the chrome. Again, I have a video about this specific process and we'll leave a link below. I do all these separate videos so I don't have to bore my subscribers with repetitive details in each video I use them in. The plating has two purposes here. One, it protects the Zamac metal, which will corrode over time if exposed to air and moisture. And two, the chrome, which is actually nickel here, has a more blue metallic shade to it that more closely looks like the metal on a T-800. Now it's time to give my face some contrast. To do this, I'll paint over it with some black acrylic, making sure to get all the paint into the etched areas. After the paint has had a few seconds to dry, I'll then rub the roof of the truck against a paper plate. Using a paper plate is actually quite important for this, as the plate has some coating on it that allows the free movement of the car across its surface without scratching the polished metal. If done correctly, the plate will remove the paint on all the flat surfaces, but leave all the paint in the etched areas. After it dries, the face should have a much more dynamic look, and I can go ahead and add in some red eyes with a Sharpie marker. So I'm going to fast forward through this next little bit. My initial idea was to sort of create that scene at the beginning credits where you see the T-800 surrounded in flames. I had these flame tattoos and I applied them to the sides of the truck, and when you look straight down at the face you would see the flames on both sides, which was kind of cool. After the tattoos had dried, I clear coated over them to both bury and protect them. However, the end results were not very good. Looking closely, there were some air bubbles under the tattoos that I had missed, and in some areas the metal seemed to react with the clear coat. I already had several hours of work in this project, but felt this was not up to par, so I went in reverse and removed all the clear coat and the flames. This brought me back to the bare metal surface. I then went ahead and reworked the face with the black acrylic, and then decided to paint the sides of the truck with Vallejo's exhaust manifold metallic color. This color was designed to paint and replicate hot metal parts on models. When you heat and temper a steel part, the steel goes through several colors, starting off with a beautiful blue and ending in a gray-brown with hints of yellow. This paint tries to capture this heated metal look with that hint of yellow. This truck has some gold-plated parts, and here I was trying to tie them all together. Speaking of gold, I decided to go with some gold-plated rims, again to tie in the engine and the paint. I can't remember what these wheels came off of, but whatever it was, it's a perfect fit for this truck, so I can do a very simple wheel swap. Wheel swaps are where a lot of customizers start off. It's definitely where I started off. They're usually simple to do, especially if you're swapping sets of the same size like I am here. All you have to do, once you have the car apart, is just cut off the small fingers holding in the axles. You can then just pop out the old set and drop in the new ones. With a little practice, you can actually cut the fingers in a way that allows them to still work and hold the new set in place. The fingers are not what actually holds everything together. This is actually done by the interior plastic. The fingers are actually just there as part of the production process. Mattel builds the bases separate to the body, with the wheels and axles held in place by the fingers. Later they marry the base and wheels with the rest of the body, and the interior plastic takes over holding and supporting the axles. This is just a long-winded way of saying that they're not needed, so if you cut them all the way off, it will not affect the car other than making it a bit more difficult to put back together. The last thing I'll do with this truck is to paint the interior seats and the dash red. Again, I'm trying to tie everything together, and here the red interior will look good with the red eyes. Once the paint dries, I will clear coat it with some gloss clear coat. With all that done, I can put the model back together. As you probably noticed, I decided to go with the black walls for the tires, but I also showed what it looks like with the white walls. Let me know what you prefer below. A subject that comes up every so often has to do with making mistakes and how often I make them. Well, I make them all the time, but with the magic of editing, you can fix these mistakes without most people knowing you made them. All these cars are a process though, and sometimes the idea in my head is not what is always produced. This model is a great example. In this case, I like what was produced more than what I had originally envisioned, though the overall theme I was going for is somewhat watered down. I'll probably try this again in the future using the Combat Medic van and just sand the roof. I still like the idea of a Cyberdyne Systems company van with the T-800 head on top. Not to mention the Combat Medic has a lot more room on top, and I think I could get much more detail in the head. Well, let me know what your thoughts are. Would you want to see this done on the van, or maybe you have some other ideas where this etching process would be useful? Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll be back.